So we're very happy to be here with all of you today. Welcome to Chicago, to all of our visitors. I'd like to introduce our panel tonight. To my left, I'm joined by Pierre Bueller, the Chief Financial Officer of Kayak and Open Table, or he manages the finance team for both. So if you need a dinner reservation in Chicago tomorrow night, maybe you should see Pierre. Next to him, we have CFO of ANGI Homeservices, Miss Jamie Cohen. You might better know her company by its brand names, Home Advisor, Angie's List, and Handy. And then we have Ron Will, the Chief Financial Officer of Ripple. If you know cryptocurrency, you know Ripple. They're the majority owner of XRP, a digital asset akin to Bitcoin. So welcome. Thank you guys all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I'd like to start off with a question that kind of gets to the heart of tonight's event, especially tonight's particular panel, and that goes to what Lisa said, the role of CFO as disruptor. Would you agree in your current role as CFO at your particular company that you act as a so-called disruptor? Do you work to kind of harness data and unleash new value? Do you agree with this notion that we're kind of putting forth tonight that the role of a CFO has evolved? You're certainly not just keeping the books, perhaps like CFOs were in the past. Do you consider yourself this so-called disruptor that we're talking about?
I totally agree. Bookkeeping is only part of the puzzle, and it might be becoming a smaller part. But I wouldn't say disrupting is a one-man task or one-person task. I don't think it should be either. I do see how finance professionals can play a much bigger role in enabling disruptors across the business, keeping them honest, helping them measure ROIs, track performance. That's a big role for the finance team, and it's a lot of fun to do. A lot of people in my team love doing it.
Great. How about you, Jamie?
To add on, I completely agree. I think I see the CFO as really being at the nexus of the business and providing real-time insights and visibility, access to data, and then proliferating those insights, for the rest of the business. I think the word disruptor kind of comes with a bit of a negative connotation, but I think of it as more of a unifying role. So helping to connect the organization, creating cross-functional teams through finance that are talking through finance and sharing a common language.
Great. How about you, Ron?
Yeah, I think just to build on that, if you look at a typical organization, you're going to have these silos of data. So whether it's sales has a certain view, whether it's through Salesforce.com and all the data that's coming out from the field. Customer success has a different lens, and as you kind of walk through the organization, I think finance is one of the only positions that allows you to see the bit of the complete picture, and also on a regular cadence. So you can, whether it's monthly or quarterly, you're kind of forced to really dig in and evaluate the business at a much more holistic level. So I definitely see, now whether that makes you a disruptor or just more of kind of the truth speaker, a lot of times, I think it kind of depends on the role and the situation. I think we have an enterprise sales business at Ripple. I would say I'm a bit disruptive with our enterprise sales team and just trying to drive some efficiency there, as well as just how they're thinking about their business. I think in other parts of the business, maybe less disruptive, if you will.
So as CFO, you're charged with thinking about investments in technology to make your business do better, to make sure your company stays innovative. Not an easy task. Can you talk a little bit about what strategies you use to pick which technology you're using and kind of what benchmarks you use to measure whether it's being productive, whether it's making you be as innovative as you'd like? Let me go back to you, Ron, if you'd like.
Sure. I think for us, we're a Silicon Valley-based company, so I'm not going to tell our CTO and our head of product, what technologies to use and be prescriptive in that way. I think it's more around making sure we're making investments where we have constraints, for example. So right now, hiring in, I think around the country, but particularly in the Bay Area, is particularly tough. So, making investments in things that allow us automation for, let's say, our data team. I've had sessions with every team within engineering to make sure they understand, hey, if there's low-hanging fruit, if there's automated tools that we can use, we'll make investments in those things that will kind of slow down the pace of resources that we need to develop so that they can build on top of that. And the same thing in the finance team, where whether it's automated budgeting tools like Anaplan, RevSim, things like that across the accounting org, we try to make sure that as an earlier stage company, we're making those investments now, so we don't have to keep scaling linear with personnel. So it's just this kind of one lens that I usually bring to the discussion.
And just to follow up with you on that, what's the reaction to folks when you tell them you want to use kind of technology and that kind of automation? Are they insistent on adding more personnel? Are they open to the idea of?
Yeah, I think it depends on the lens they're taking. Mm-hmm. And so, I typically don't come across as, hey, we're not going to resource this area. It's more a discussion on, let's be realistic about your ability to continue to scale in the Bay Area or in the United States on technology resources. Inevitably you're going to hit some roadblocks about your hiring goals, and wouldn't you rather leverage what limited resources you are actually able to hire versus what I budget in a more constructive way.
How about you, Jamie? What kind of technologies and how do you measure that?
So we're a little bit unique in being a marketplace that we actually have internally built software, is our product. So a lot of the large investment is actually in our product and technology teams and personnel. So I think, one way we think about that is present ROI cases behind, products that we want to build, people we want to hire. But it also gives us some flexibility in that, if we run a small pilot or a smoke test and find that it's not producing what we want, we can easily pivot to the next idea, and there's plenty of those to be had. We're also looking at various third-party investments as well in finance automation, better tools for folks, and we also have a marketplace of two sides of people that we're connecting, and so one of the things we've been investing a lot in is in good communication, so helping our service professionals communicate with the homeowners, and we actually have now technology and techniques and tracking that prove that the quicker you call, you do close that job, and we can provide that feedback and coaching and tools back to our service providers.
How about you, Pierre?
Very much, I feel I'm roughly where Jamie is. We're a software business. The vast majority of our people are engineers, world class, and they build our software. Our real investment in technology is that workforce and funneling that. If I take the question towards finance, my main strategy would be to really invite and motivate people in finance to be inquisitive and optimistic when it comes to technology that they can use for themselves. We briefly spoke about laziness as something that I think is extremely constructive. People that do tasks and get frustrated, that to me is always, or should be, the birth of something pretty promising. Frustration should lead them to go and dig around, find out if there's technology out there that can solve your frustration, automate it away, simplify your job. And if that works, it's paid off many, many times. You gain accuracy. You gain motivation. People love not doing repetitive work. Right. So to me, it's mainly a cultural thing, getting people to be excited about technology.
Awesome. So tonight we're also talking about the importance of data. Can you guys talk about what are some examples of data collection technologies that you found particularly impactful for your business? I'll start with you, Jamie.
So data is kind of in our DNA and at our core, so we have a lot of data that we can leverage. In terms of collection and how we process that data, we've found a lot of value in both Tableau as well as OB Visual Analyzer to create self-service tools and ad hoc reporting, put the reporting and back into the hands of the users so that they can self-serve, but also focusing the analytics team on more value-added, insight-driven work. So it's not just, pure churning out reporting and spitting it back out.
How about you, Pierre?
We're in an extremely measurable business. We hardly have any physical assets. Data is everywhere. I would say that data collection is almost a given for us. Data availability is actually not a challenge at all. We have way more data than we'll ever be able to chew on. So the real challenge becomes, how do you get that little bit of data relevance out of the data? Okay. And as such, when you think about technology, the technology that really unlocks the value in data is the APIs and connections that we've built ourselves, most of them, to pull and push data around into our systems, to have it show up in places where it can really complete the story and eventually lead to an insight that can lead to an action. So a lot of it's homegrown and ever-changing.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, we've spent, to echo a lot of the comments, but one area we've spent a lot of time with is working with the data team, the engineering teams, and also the finance teams on just leveraging cloud So Amazon Web Services and Google have quite a bit of tools that are already kind of baked in that we leverage quite a bit. We found that, and just providing, whether it's an economic model that people can use to start thinking about, okay, when do we start moving more and more pieces of our infrastructure to the cloud, particularly around the data area, has been really important for us. When you start thinking about, we're at Ripple effectively building payment network, and the amount of data that grows exponentially, having a very clear framework about what we're going to either co-host ourselves, where we're going to leverage the cloud, has been really important for us from an economic perspective.
Great. So now I'm going to turn to the audience. You all have downloaded that browser app that Lisa mentioned earlier. If you could pull it up, we have a live poll we'd like to pull up on the screens for this panel. It's not that often that we have an audience of your caliber here, so we want to get your insight as well. They're pulling that up now, and the question is, which technology trend will have the greatest impact on your industry over the next 5 years? And we've got 5 choices here. Panel, listen up, because you guys are going to be asked this next. Augmented reality and virtual reality, artificial intelligence and machine learning, automation, big data, and blockchain. So it looks like the results are still coming in. Wow, it's pretty close, though AR and VR have no responses. I'll turn to you, Pierre. Can you tell me what your answer would be?
Yeah. In the Kayak app, there's an AR functionality where you can take a photo of your bag and it'll tell you where it fits in the bulkhead area.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But honestly, I personally feel AR and VR is a little gimmicky.
Okay.
And
seems like the audience might agree.
Yeah, blockchain feels like that should be Ron's answer. I'm going to go with automation.
Okay.
I'm huge on automation. It's
that got a bump up just as you said.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. It's vital to scalability. It actually means a lot for the P&L. If you really automate, you find a way to scale the business, which allows you to grow overhead expenses slower than revenues. And it's vital for margins. Moreover, it is very motivating to people. I actually think a lot of people love working on new things, new challenges. Finding a way to get computers and robots to do repetitive tasks and take it away from individuals is going to add accuracy and add motivation for your people. I'm huge on automation.
Great. How about you, Jamie?
So I guess AR, VR is not, I was thinking smart home automation is a huge trend, that I think will become increasingly large and proliferate in our industry. Appliances that can call the plumber for you, or you can speak to your appliance and tell them, and it basically calls a service and schedules it and has it, booked for you. I also think, artificial intelligence and machine learning to just, better our back-end algorithms, whether that's in our call center. So we have a very large call center, both sales and operations, that do a lot of calling. So getting a lot smarter about who we call, when we call, or who needs to talk to whom, as well as just the algorithms around routing service professionals to homeowners and getting closer to the transaction and helping facilitate that.
How about you?
I'll take blockchain.
You're right.
If you think about just the friction that's caused by whether things in the payment, the payment networks that we deal with every day, as CFOs, everyone's had to wire money around the world. Why does it take 5 days to get there? Why do you have no auditability? Why do you, and it's all because of the correspondent banking network. It's because of SWIFT. It's because of centralized authorities, and the ability for blockchain to solve some of those issues is kind of fascinating to me. That's why I joined Ripple. And I think across a lot of use cases, you're definitely seeing a lot in the blockchain space of just hype. And one of the good things about, I would say, the past 12 months has been the cooling off of a lot of the pilots and kind of proof of concept around blockchain that were popping up. Does there really need to be a blockchain for fresh flowers so that you can make sure that there's proof of delivery and everything else? Probably not. You could use the database. But there's all these other areas that I think if you dig into that, do you really need a centralized authority to provide any aspect of that transaction? You'd probably say, wait, in this day and age, do we really need that? And I think that's some of the things that get really interesting around blockchain. how it actually impacts people in this room, in their finance departments, or in their companies. I think it's early days. If you take a look at financial institutions, you think at other use cases. If you look at digital media, you look at gaming, that maybe more closely potentially touch a digital asset or cryptocurrency. I think it would be a little bit more tangible to those industries.
I don't know if you guys can see the screens. Are there any responses? Oh, can we keep that up? Are there any, does the response of the audience surprise you at all? I mean, the fact that AR and VR are so low and the fact that big data is winning, is that a surprise to anyone, or is that what you would expect?
A little bit. Trying to be nice about it, but I think big data feels like yesterday's news to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's stuff that we all should be doing in a really serious way. There's a ton of value there, but I wouldn't call out big data as the thing that's going to make a big difference in the next 5 years. It feels like something we should be all riding that wave right now.
Well, how do you balance the pressures of time and cost when you're looking to drive innovation? You kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier, Ron, when you talked about automation and kind of finding personnel. But do you have set timelines on how long you'll test a certain technology to make sure it's having the right effect? Do you have like a way to measure systematically how budget and cost kind of factor in whether you're going to go with one technology or for another, whether you're going to kind of convince your CEO or the rest of your board to make that kind of investment and that kind of commitment? Is there anything in particular you would say to that?
So we have a culture that is truly test and learn embedded, and I think the rigor of that test depends on the risk around the investment. So we have, for example, email newsletter. We do constant testing on the layouts of our email newsletters, but there's very little downside. We have a base that we're testing against to try to make incremental improvements. So there's not a significant amount of rigor. Those are pretty simple A/B tests. If we're launching, a new product, we launched a new product last year that we called Opt-in that had the risk of cannibalizing the base product and our core monetization. So we had, an extremely rigorous, statistically significant, market-driven test that we monitored for, 6+ months before we rolled out fully, because the level of risk is so high. I think the cost is, the opportunity cost of not moving faster with something that could have a lot of promise, but there's a lot of downside as well that we're trying to mitigate and be cautious with.
How about you, Ron, in terms of budget and cost?
I think the way we look at it, I think it's very similar around the risk spectrum. Mm-hmm. I do think one of the conversations that Pierre and I had earlier was around, the ability to deal, the finance department's ability to deal with ambiguity.
Right.
And at some level, we're at Ripple, we have 6 years of total company history, and in our current product suite and payment network, we have about 3. And so you put that together, you don't have a whole lot of data points to start playing with cohort analysis and a variety of other techniques to look at how various customers played out, or more deeply how the technology played out. And so some of this comes down to relying on the personnel and their judgment calls when presenting. And so, I think we do want to draw a line where we get this false precision, or we're slowed down as a finance department from making decisions or recommending decisions because we just don't have sufficient data or enough of a framework to present, whether it's to the board or anyone else, because of some of the things that Jamie mentioned, where are we going to lose market share because of this, or someone else is going to get in our industry greater mind share with customers potentially.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. The one thing I'll add again is that I'm huge on culture, clearly. We have such an incredibly talented workforce at Kayak OpenTable, but we're 2,000 of us, and we have a DNA of entrepreneurship, and I think we're good at saying, hey, we know enough to make this decision. But such a big group of very smart people has a tendency to go and dig in and want more answers, understand better. So one real clever way and powerful way to balance this is really invite people to make mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of the deal. We're going to have to make decisions, and they're not all going to be great decisions. Because if they're going to be great decisions, we won't be taking them soon enough, and then there'll be bad decisions after all. So a lot of it sits in culture and inspiring people to embrace the fact that, hey, we just need to make a couple of good calls. Not every answer has to be perfect at all.
So you mentioned inspiring people, and this was something we talked about earlier. You said, I know we're talking about finance, and it can be a bit dry, but how do you motivate people in your department? You talked about some of the management techniques you use to kind of get people excited about what they're doing and things like that. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, people's motivation, inspired and talented people is absolutely the key thing in our business. We're a human capital firm, like almost every other business in the world. Motivating people is an art. It's not something you just do. So there's no super simple answer. Big topics in motivating people for me sit around empowerment, especially nowadays, getting people to feel they're relevant, they have freedom to chip in. A big one for me is work-life balance. Okay. The space is rather undefined. We're going to be doing stuff in the future that we don't know exactly what it is right now. Opportunity is abundant. There's going to be a ton of opportunity. And the best way to deal with that is to be awake and energized and curious when the opportunity presents itself. If we just work through the night when the opportunity comes along, there's a good chance we're not going to see it, we're not going to be ready to jump on it. So having people well-rested, curious, optimistic, that's vital to me. The last one I'll mention is diversity, which is a word that you hear almost too often these days. In this case, diversity of opinion, I think, is a really powerful thing. And not enough do I see people value the real power of disagreement, because that is where you get to the right answers. Strict hierarchies where people don't dare to speak up, even if they truly think we're going in the wrong direction, that would spook me. Okay. So I hope I cultivate a culture in which people feel free to always stick up their hand and say, hey, I don't get it, or hey, I think that might be wrong. Because that's the way we really get to, as a group, know more than individuals.
Jamie, can you talk about motivation at ANGI?
Yeah, so we really think of ourselves as a meritocracy. We tend to hire really hungry, talented folks that want to, move up, and we really try to empower them as well. And ideas are not top down; they kind of proliferate from all around the organization. And so, one great example of that is we recently came up with a concept we launched in Chicago of a sales center in a box, and this was from a couple of individuals in our lower in our tech and real estate department that worked together and came up with the concept of a low risk way to enter into a new market with a sales center and put 20 people in a WeWork and see if it works, see if we can recruit, see if we can sell without having to commit to a 10-year lease and thousands, tens, thousands, 20,000 of square feet to house those people.
And so can you tell us how it
went?
Yeah,
it's been great. We actually just signed a 7 to 10 year lease for a lot of square footage in Chicago because the WeWork went so well. And so now we're looking at other markets that we can launch that concept, but
of doing like kind of the mini testing it. That's great. How about you, Ron?
Yeah, we do a lot of special projects for people on the finance team. So try to figure out some area that's not getting looked at enough, and whether it's people in the AP department, people in FP&A, it really doesn't make a difference. Just kind of dig into one area, and we find that by getting some exposure to myself and other members of the executive team, by just being able to focus on one particular issue, it gets usually people pretty motivated and out of the day-to-day grind. You have to have some swing resources so that people can cover their effective day job. But we find that kind of shakes things up a little bit and also opens them up to what's going on in other parts of the company that make them a little bit better at their job. So we're trying to do more rotational things where people are going out in FP&A where they spend time in either Europe or Asia with the sales teams and customer success teams that we have out there, so they can have a better understanding of who's emailing them about sales contracts. And I think making sure you're thinking about their personal development helps quite a bit with motivation, as opposed to at a startup like Ripple, we're about 325-ish people, but we still think of us as a bit of a very small company. It's very easy to kind of get into the grind, not have the work-life balance, not really think about people's personal development, and there's still, as derogatory a term it is, whether the millennials or not, they are looking at, hey, over the last 6 months, what have I learned?
Right.
What do I have to show for this? How many bullet points on my resume do I really have at the end of the day? And I think it's really important to kind of talk to them about, hey, we can get you involved in, we have some really interesting things going on in sales compensation. Would that be interesting if you want to dig into, how we're paying out commissions or, other projects in accounting around technical accounting. And but I do think it's taking up, I'd say, kind of roughly 20-ish% of my time on just, hey, there's a problem, I'm keeping a list. All right, who might be someone who can work on that, and then dedicating some time to work with that individual to make sure that they stay motivated. And that's a fairly sizable commitment that you got to make. And I look for the people who report up to me to be making similar type investments in their personnel.
Great. Well, on that pretty positive note, we're going to end. I just want to thank you guys for being here today and taking the time to speak with everyone. So thanks so much.